All right, let's talk about something that's on pretty much everyone's mind. What is fair pay? And maybe more importantly, how do we actually get it? So let's just jump right in and make this personal. Are you paid fairly? I mean, really, how can you be sure? It sounds like such a simple question, but digging into the answer, well, that's where things get complicated.
To even start answering that, we've got to look way beyond just the number on your paycheck. We need to talk about what's called total compensation. And no, that's not just your salary. It's the whole shebang. It's your base pay, sure, but also bonuses, benefits like health insurance, and even the stuff that's harder to put a price tag on, like feeling valued or having job security. All of it. It all counts.
Okay, so this whole idea of total compensation, it doesn't just exist in a bubble. It actually operates inside one of two really powerful systems, or cycles.
So, check this out. A company's pay strategy isn't a one-and-done thing. It's actually a feedback loop. It can create this amazing, positive, upward spiral, what the source material calls a virtuous cycle, where fair pay just keeps leading to more success. Or it can go the other way, into a negative downward spiral, a vicious cycle that just drags everything down with it.
So here's the thing you have to remember. Falling into that vicious cycle, it's not always some evil plan. A lot of the time, it just starts with a simple mistake. Because getting compensation right is, well, it's incredibly complex. Even what looks like simple math can go wrong in a hurry.
And to show you just how easy it is for things to go off the rails, let's look at a quick example. We're going to run the numbers for an employee named Lucille.
Okay, so here are Lucille's hours for the week. Looks pretty straightforward at first glance, right? But take a closer look at Wednesday. See that? 4 hours worked plus 4 hours of paid sick time. Now, the little asterisk there is key. While that sick time gets paid, it doesn't actually count as hours worked when you're calculating overtime. And that right there, that's the kind of tiny detail where mistakes are born.
So, what's the right answer? How much does Lucille get paid? The correct total is $364. And here's the tricky part. Even though she was paid for 45 hours, she only worked 41. Those 4 sick hours don't count towards the 40-hour overtime threshold. So she gets 40 regular hours and only 1 single hour of overtime. It's a tiny, tiny detail. But think about it. If you mess that up and underpay her, you've just created a feeling of unfairness. That's a seed for a vicious cycle. And if you overpay her, well, that hurts the company. Getting this stuff right, it's everything. Okay, so we've seen how tiny details matter. Now, let's zoom out a bit. How do we test for fairness on a bigger scale? Well, a really interesting study on graduate students tried to do exactly that.
To pull this off, the researchers used a really important legal idea called disparate impact. Now, what that means is you have a policy or a test that seems totally neutral, totally fair on the surface. But in practice, it ends up hurting a specific group of people more than others. And the really critical part, it's illegal even if nobody meant to discriminate.
And wouldn't you know it, there's a standard, pretty simple legal test for this. It's called the 4/5 rule. So, in this study, they applied the 4/5 rule to the grades of 104 students. The basic idea is that if one group's success rate is less than 80%, that's 4/5, of the most successful group's rate, then you've got a red flag for disparate impact. Well, in this case, the pass rate for men was over 91% of the pass rate for women, who actually did a little better. Since 91% is way above that 80% line, the conclusion was clear. In this particular class, there was no evidence of a disparate impact based on gender. This allowed the researchers to say, and I'm quoting here, that they could rule out the existence of a vicious cycle or a cruel learning environment due to gender inequity. So, at least in this one controlled setting, the system was working fairly. But that's not all the study found. They stumbled onto something else that's really fascinating. Turns out, students scored way better on their overall coursework, papers, projects, class discussions, than they did on one big, high-stakes final exam. And what does that tell you? It suggests that maybe a single test isn't the best way to measure what someone really knows. A more complete picture often gives you a more accurate one.
So that's great, right? The study shows a fair outcome in this nice, neat, controlled environment. But what happens when we step outside the classroom and into the messy reality of the real world?
Yeah, the picture changes a lot. That fair and balanced outcome from the study, unfortunately, it's just not what we see when we look at the economy as a whole.
In the real world, we see this, 83 cents. That's what women in the U.S. earn on average for every single dollar a man earns. And despite years of progress, that gap is just stubbornly sticking around.
So why? Why is that number so persistent? Well, the source material makes it clear it's not just one thing. It's a whole ecosystem of factors. We're talking about biases in hiring, both conscious and unconscious, unequal access to opportunities, and just plain old societal stereotypes about gender roles. And get this, the paper even points out that sometimes well-meaning policies, like certain family-friendly benefits, can accidentally end up reinforcing the very stereotypes we're trying to get rid of.
Okay, so if that's the problem, what's the solution? How do we get off that path and intentionally build a virtuous one?
Well, first, we have to admit that bias can pop up in some really surprising places. Take a look at this example. An AI tool was given just two names, Bahadin and Fiza, and it spit out a cartoon making all sorts of assumptions about their ethnicity and religion. It's a pretty stark reminder that our tools, even the most cutting-edge ones, can just reflect and even amplify our own biases.
But the good news is, we're not helpless here. There are clear, concrete steps that organizations can take right now. It all starts with actually auditing your own pay systems to see where the problems are. From there, it's about being transparent about how pay works, stopping the practice of asking for salary history, which just carries old biases forward, and really, truly investing in your internal talent, especially people from underrepresented groups. That means training, mentorship, and real shots at advancement.
When you boil it all down, it really comes to a fundamental choice, and this quote from the research just nails it. Are your employees an asset that you need to invest in, or are they just an expense that you need to minimize? The first path leads to that virtuous cycle. The second, well, that leads straight to the vicious one. So we'll leave you with this thought. Getting to true pay equity, it's not just a company's job. It takes action from policymakers who set the rules of the game, and it takes individuals who are willing to advocate for themselves and for others. It's really a shared responsibility. So the question we want to leave you with is this. Where do you think we should focus our energy first to make the biggest, fastest difference?